Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hey, welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. Standing by in the wings is Mr. John Cornett. We're happy to have him back and in good health. And right here, hey, there you are. You're there. And then we have Dana Canales is here to help co-host tonight and guest and talk about TV and these two huge buds you have in front of you. But we have a lot of news tonight. Things are happening all over the world, and we'll bring you up to date in the world of cannabis if you'll just stand by after we bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaves. They're coming any minute. You gotta try.
The force.
First story tonight is from Washington, D.C. House and Senate lawmakers have approved legislation, the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, otherwise known as the Farm Bill, which for the first time includes provisions lifting the United States' century-long prohibition on domestic commercial hemp production. The president is anticipated to sign the bill into law in the coming days. The significance of this change could not be underemphasized. This law marks the first change in the federal classification of the cannabis plant since it was initially classified in the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 as a Schedule I controlled substance by Congress in 1970, and paves the way for the first federally sanctioned commercial hemp grows since World War II. As statewide and public support in favor of broader marijuana reforms continue to grow, it's apparent that the federal change won't be the last when it comes to the cannabis plant. The hemp-specific provisions of the Act amend the Federal Controlled Substances Act of 1970 so that hemp plants containing no more than 0.3% or 1/3% THC are no longer classified as a Schedule I controlled substance under federal law. The Act also broadens the definition of hemp to include any part of the plant, including extracts or cannabinoids, that does not possess greater than 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis. In Lansing, Michigan, an effort to undermine Michigan's Proposition 1, a voter-approved initiative that legalized adult-use marijuana just last month, failed to gain support in the Michigan State Senate. In a last-ditch effort to deny Michigan residents the legal right to grow marijuana in their home, Michigan's Senate Majority Leader Meekhoff introduced Senate Bill 1243 that would have stripped the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act of language that allows adults to grow 12 plants at home for personal use. Due to limited time frame and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle unwilling to support the bill, Majority Leader Meekhoff's effort to undermine the will of the voters failed miserably. With the legislature scheduled to adjourn next week, marijuana consumers in Michigan have a lot to be thankful for this holiday season. When Senator Meekhoff introduced Senate Bill 1243, the advocate community in Michigan coalesced like mercury. Everyone was unified in opposition to overreaching bill, so they're able to apply pressure to both chambers of the state legislature. This was a bad bill, and even Meekhoff's own colleagues couldn't bring themselves to support it. Out of the state capitol in Springfield, Missouri, Amendment 2, the state's voter-initiated medical cannabis access law, took effect on Thursday, December 6th. 66% of the voters approved the measure in Missouri last November, while rejecting a pair of competing initiatives. State regulators have 180 days from the law's enactment date to make available application forms to patients seeking to register to grow or possess medical cannabis. Under the program, physicians may recommend cannabis therapy at his or her discretion. Qualified patients may obtain cannabis from licensed dispensaries or grow their own. Retail cannabis sales will be taxed at 4%. Tax revenues are earmarked to fund programs to assist state veterans. Also on December 6th, medical cannabis also became legal in Utah, and adult use cannabis, known as recreational use, became legal in Michigan too. Legalization legislation in New Jersey will not be passed before the end of the year. New Jersey Senate President Sweeney and Assembly Speaker Coughlin, along with Governor Murphy, still have not decided on key details of the proposal, including tax rates and the governing body that will oversee the regulated industry in New Jersey. Lawmakers in Nebraska have established a campaign committee called Nebraskans for Sensible Marijuana Laws that will aim to qualify a 2020 medical cannabis ballot measure and possibly even adult use as well. New York State begins drafting their adult use marijuana legalization legislation. The state's Department of Health, in partnership with New York University and the RAND Corporation, are funding a survey to gain insights on individuals' firsthand experience with cannabis consumption. The survey responses will help shape the legislation that will follow and what the adult use market will look like. To the north, following Canada's decision to become the first country in North America and only the second in the world after Uruguay in South America to legalize the use and retail sale of cannabis, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency published a memorandum affirming that those Canadians either involved or invested in the legal cannabis industry may be barred admission into the United States. The agency modified their policy directive on October 9th of this year, acknowledging, quote, a Canadian citizen working in the legal marijuana industry in Canada coming into the U.S. for reasons unrelated to the marijuana industry will generally be admissible to the United States. However, if a traveler is found to be coming to the United States for reasons related to the marijuana industry, they may be deemed inadmissible, end quote. In response to this hardline position, Portland, Oregon's own U.S. Representative Earl Blumenauer, the founder of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, has introduced the Maintaining Appropriate This legislation provides protections for individuals whose actions are lawful in the state, Indian tribe, or foreign country in which the conduct is occurred, or that was subsequently made lawful under the law or regulation of such jurisdiction. In regard to the emerging legal status of marijuana in the United States and internationally, there have already been examples of the United States' punitive border policy needlessly wrecking lives. In one such example, an individual received a lifetime ban from entering the United States on November 14th simply because he was an investor in a legal Canadian marijuana business. It's crucial that the United States recognize the rights of both our citizens and our international allies to be able to travel freely between our two nations and to reform federal border policies to acknowledge this new reality. And to the south, Mexico has a good chance of becoming the third nation in the world to legalize marijuana for adult use after Uruguay and Canada. Mexican President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador, or he's president now, took office on December 1st and has submitted legislation this month seeking to legalize marijuana for adult use. Mexico legalized marijuana for medical use in June 2017, but the new law limits medical marijuana products to cannabis derivatives that contain less than 1% THC. The bill submitted by the new president would allow individuals to grow up to 20 plants and produce up to 17 ounces of marijuana each year. Law would allow public smoking and growing cooperatives, but not edible products. This comes after Mexico's Supreme Court ruled in October that a ban on marijuana for adult use is unconstitutional, declaring, quote, the effects caused by marijuana do not justify an absolute prohibition on its consumption, end quote. According to political analysts, the bill has a good shot at passing in 2019. The president has been vocal critic of the war on drugs approach and promised to cut down violent crimes in the country. According to the Los Angeles Times, there were 31,174 recorded homicides in 2017, the highest number in 20 years. This year, the number is on track to surpass last year's number. López Obrador's political party, Morena, has control of both houses of Congress, and the president-elect's interior minister and former Supreme Court justice has criticized Mexico's prohibitionist drug policy and co-wrote the proposed marijuana bill. Next story is from New Mexico. The use of medical marijuana for a period of 1 month or more is associated with reduced opioid intake in patients with cancer or rheumatic pain conditions, according to clinical data published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. A team of investigators from Camara Independent Physicians Medical Group in New Mexico assessed the relationship between the use of medical cannabis and opioids in a cohort of 133 patients. In addition, the addition of medical cannabis was associated with pain score improvements in 80% of the patients with cancer and 75% of non-cancer patients. Cannabis therapy was associated with opioid dosing reductions in 41% of the cohort. The study's conclusions are consistent with those of several prior papers reporting that patients enrolled in medical marijuana access programs typically reduce their use of opiate pain medicines. The study, Opioid Dose Reduction and Pain Control with Medical Cannabis, appears in this month's edition of the Journal of Clinical Oncology. Out of Fort Collins, Colorado, the opening of marijuana retailers is positively associated with rising neighborhood home values, according to data in the journal Contemporary Economic Policy. Colorado State University researchers assessed the impact of dispensary openings in Denver on home prices in the immediate vicinity. They reported, quote, a new dispensary opening increases house prices by 7.7% for houses within a quarter-mile radius of the dispensary relative to a control group. For houses within a quarter to a half-mile radius, the effect is slightly lower at around 5%. The treatment effect's also larger, around 10% for homes with no pre-existing dispensaries nearby. Dispensaries had no effect on housing prices for properties located more than a half-mile away. The study concluded, quote, our results combined with previous estimates in the literature provide a comprehensive analysis of the effect of marijuana dispensing on house prices. Our findings suggest that legalization and dispensary openings create localized net benefits, end quote. The study's findings are consistent with those of other papers which similarly report a rise in home values in neighborhoods in close proximity to marijuana-related businesses. The study, The Effect of Marijuana Dispensary Openings on Housing Prices, appears in this month's edition of Contemporary Economic Policy. Our next story is from New Haven, Connecticut. Sickle cell disease patients who utilize medical cannabis require fewer hospitalizations as compared to sickle cell disease patients who refrain from the substance, according to data published in the journal Blood. Investigators from Yale University in Connecticut and the Sackler School of Medicine in Israel compared rates of hospital admissions over a 6-month period in a cohort of sickle cell disease patients. The authors reported no differences in patients' hospital admission rates prior to their use of medical cannabis, but recorded a decrease in admissions among those who elected to use medical cannabis over the following months as compared to the controls. The authors wrote, quote, we suggest that medical marijuana allowed patients to improve their pain relief and thereby reduce admission rates, end quote, the authors concluded. While the use of medical cannabis is relatively common among patients with sickle cell disease, it's yet to be clinically evaluated for efficacy in those with the disease. The study, Medical Marijuana for Sickle Cell Disease, results of 2 years of certification in Adult Sickle Cell Center, appears in this month's edition of Blood. Also out of Jerusalem in Israel, fibromyalgia patients suffering from lower back pain respond favorably to medical cannabis treatment, according to clinical data published in the journal Clinical and Experimental Rheumatology. Israel researchers assessed the analgesic efficacy of both opioids and medical cannabis in 31 fibromyalgia patients with lower back pain. The participants were treated with inhaled cannabis of relatively low THC potency, less than 5%, for a minimum of 6 months. The patients reported greater pain improvements with medical cannabis as opposed to the use of opioids alone. Patients demonstrated increased range of motion following cannabis treatment, but did not show any similar improvement with opioids. While undergoing cannabis treatment, the majority of patients elected to decrease or discontinue pharmaceutical analgesic consumption, a finding that's consistent with several other studies. The authors concluded, quote, this observational crossover study demonstrates an advantage of medical cannabis treatment in fibromyalgia patients with lower back pain as compared with standard analgesic therapy. Further, studies randomized clinical trials should assess whether these results can be generalized to the fibromyalgia population at large." End quote. This study, effective adding medical cannabis treatment to analgesic treatment in patients with low back pain related to fibromyalgia, appears in Clinical and Experimental Rheumatology. Out of Vermont, the interbreeding of cannabis plants has resulted in a dearth of pure indica or sativa strains, according to a review published in the journal Cannabis and Cannabinoid Research. In most cases, the classifications are used arbitrarily, the author states. Quote, "Categorizing cannabis as either sativa and indica has become an exercise in futility. Ubiquitous interbreeding and hybridization renders that distinction meaningless." End quote. A prior study published in the journal PLOS One in 2015 determined that strains of cannabis sativa and cannabis indica possess relatively few significant genetic differences and are often mislabeled by breeders. This study, Cannabis Systematics at the Level of Family, Genus, and Species, appears in Cannabis and Cannabinoid Research this month. Out of New York City, the long-term use of Epidiolex is associated with reduced seizure frequency in patients with pediatric refractory epilepsy, according to data published in the journal CNS Drugs. A team of investigators from Columbia University in New York and the University of California, San Francisco assessed the efficacy and tolerability of proprietary CBD extract Epidiolex from GW Pharmaceuticals in 26 children with refractory epilepsy over a period of several years. The authors reported that a subset of the cohort, 7 patients, experienced a sustained 50% reduction in motor seizures after 4 years of treatment. Those 7 patients remained seizure-free over the duration of the treatment. Cannabidiol imparted a clinically meaningful reduction in seizure frequency in the subset of patients with medically refractory epilepsy that was sustained over a period of 2 to 4 years, the authors concluded. In June, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved Epidiolex for the explicit treatment of 2 rare forms of severe epilepsy, Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and Dravet syndrome. In September, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration reclassified it from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule V drug, the lowest restriction classification available under federal law. This study, long-term safety, tolerability, and efficacy of cannabidiol in children with refractory epilepsy, results from an expanded access program in the United States, appears in CNS Drugs. Out of Washington, D.C., President Trump announced his intention to nominate former Attorney General William Barr to be considered by the Senate to replace former Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. With every move by the Department of Justice facing intense public scrutiny, maintaining Jeff Sessions' policy of reefer madness would be self-defeating. The movement to end the failed and cruel policy of marijuana criminalization is larger and stronger than ever, supported by a majority of Democrats, Republicans, and nonpartisans. Barr's already served once as Attorney General, from 1991 to 93 under George H.W. Bush, during which he earned a reputation as a harsh anti-drug advocate. Bush made the drug war a centerpiece of his administration, going so far to call the war on drugs the greatest domestic threat facing our nation now. The question now is whether Barr will take a similarly tough approach under Trump, who said relatively little about how legal cannabis during his time in office. He said, quote, "I think it's difficult to look through a lens that existed in 1991 and 93 and extrapolate this to this time," according to Barry Grissom, former U.S. Attorney for Kansas. Part of what made Jeff Sessions' tenure as Attorney General so remarkable was the sense that his views on cannabis had been borrowed from a Reagan-era after-school special and preserved even as public opinion steadily shifted over the decades. In 1986, Sessions joked that the Ku Klux Klan, he said, "I thought those guys were okay until I learned they smoked pot," end quote. Nearly 30 years later, Sessions was still whistling the same tune. He said, quote, "Good people don't smoke marijuana," end quote, during his 2016 Senate confirmation hearing. In 2018, 5 states legalized either the medicinal or adult use of marijuana, making total number of states out of compliance with the Controlled Substances Act now 47. It would be utterly absurd for William Barr or any agent of the Department of Justice to take action against these 47 state-sanctioned and operational programs. Over half of the members of the Senate Judiciary Committee represent states that have or are in the process of enacting a legal marijuana marketplace. It's our intention that Mr. Barr be put on record regarding his current position on cannabis, given his record as a proponent of the failed war on drugs. 33 states, Washington, D.C., and the U.S. territories of Guam and Puerto Rico have enacted legislation specific to physician-authorized use of cannabis. Moreover, an estimated 73 million Americans now reside in the 10 states where anyone over the age of 21 may possess cannabis legally. An additional 15 states have passed laws specific to the possession of CBD oil for therapeutic purposes. 68% of registered voters support the legalization of marijuana, according to national polling data compiled by the Center for American Progress. The percentage is at the highest level of support for legalization ever reported in a nationwide scientific poll. Majorities of Democrats at 77%, Independents at 62%, and Republicans at 57% back legalization. The results of a 2017 nationwide Gallup poll similarly found majority support among all three groups. To date, these statewide regulatory programs are operating largely as voters and politicians intended. The enactment of these policies have not negatively impacted workplace safety, crime rates, traffic safety, or youth use patterns. They've stimulated economic development and created hundreds of millions of dollars in new tax revenue. Specifically, a 2017 report estimated that over 149,000 Americans are now working full-time in the legal cannabis industry. Tax revenues from states like Colorado, Washington, and right here in Oregon now exceed initial projections. Further, numerous studies have identified an association between cannabis access and lower rates of abuse, hospitalization, and mortality. And that's the end of our Hemp News segment for tonight. Mr. John Cornett's been patiently standing by. Hey, John.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing
very
okay.
Patiently, I might add. I can.
You're a
chill
patient.
I'm a very patient brother. Anyway, this is that song somebody asked me about not too long ago, so I'm gonna do this for you guys right now. It's made by a guy, written by a guy named Ben Scales back in April of 2002, and it goes a whole lot like this. Growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. I got little pots of pot spread out all over the lot, and I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Got me lots of seeds from Mexico. Stuck them in the dirt and made them grow. Put them in my garden with my peppers and my peas. I get all the smoke I need for free. I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. We're keeping where no one can see you, so let's keep this between you and me. But I'm growing marijuana in my yard, something like that. I'm growing marijuana in my yard. I can't tell my boss or I'll get fired. I don't grow much, just what I use to work all day, and when I'm through, I smoke some marijuana from my yard. And the policeman, he wants to talk to me. He said, how you gonna smoke up all that weed? He said, money's what you're in it for. I don't know what, we've got a war going, boy, and I'm gonna have to haul your ass downtown with me. And I said, hey man, what is it to you? How do I infringe on what you do? I beg your pardon if you're offended by my garden, but I just can't grow Prozac in my yard, okay? So I grow my own medicine in my yard. I give my neighbor some for his heart, that's right. I share it with my grandma who keeps it from her son, 'cause we all know that stuff's against the law. Now there's nothing growing in my yard. 'Cause the cops took my land, both my cars. Now I have to buy my pot from a teenager in the parking lot who's growing marijuana in his yard. Anyone can grow it in their yard. I could show you how, it ain't hard. Never mind the president, let's overgrow the government and all grow marijuana in our yards. Let's grow some marijuana in our yard.
All right, John.
Thank you very much.
That was a good version of that song.
What's that, brother?
That was a good version of that song.
Thank you very much.
Very well. Hey, Dana, it's good to have you back. How are you doing tonight?
Great to see you. I'm doing well, thanks.
Good, good. So we had tons of news tonight. And
Boy, no kidding.
if you viewers out there have any questions, well, you can call us and ask us at 503-288-4442. That's 503-288-4442. We'll be on right up to the top of the next hour. If you want your friends and neighbors all around the world to tune in, tell them to go to facebook.com/restorehemp. That's facebook.com/restorehemp. We're streaming live right there on Facebook. So you might try that out. We got about 700,000 people that like that.
It's getting more popular all the time on Facebook.
It is.
It's easier to access, I think, for a lot of people that way.
The rules keep changing. You know, they try to take everybody off. Now they let people back on. And, you know, I think the change in the federal hemp law will have a positive effect. But,
Can only help.
yeah. But it will, I think that we're likely to see some major changes on marijuana policy for adult use at the federal government level.
I'm amazed by hearing that Utah's legalizing.
Well, you know, their legislature went in and neutered a lot of the Utah law that the voters passed. They decided that they needed to amend it before it went into effect. So the Utah Republicans, largely influenced by the Mormons or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they decided to intervene in the political process and that they know better than the voters.
I'm just shocked because I've got a good buddy that lives down in Salt Lake, and he has swore for years that they would secede from the union before they'd consider legalization.
It passed with
Yeah,
58%
so
of the vote, I believe, down there.
That's
So
awesome.
that's a
great.
good thing.
Truth is getting out there.
Yeah, and in Missouri it passed with over 66% of the vote.
You're winning. It's
And
a slow war,
in
but
Michigan,
we're
they
getting-
moved to curtail the marijuana law so that people couldn't grow their own, but they couldn't get the support behind it, even though the outgoing Speaker of the Republican House there in Lansing, Michigan, had backed this. He couldn't get even his fellow Republicans to go get behind him on that.
Wow. Well,
Voter backlash.
We've got, I think, momentum now, really, towards complete change, and that's what we only dreamed of years ago. So it's incredible to think that we'll see it in our lifetime.
So you brought a couple big 8-inch long buds there. So that's from some OG Kush clones.
OG Kush clones, yes, sir.
Okay, well, we got our little show and
Got
tell.
from a very close friend of mine.
Yeah, I gave them to you, right?
Yes,
So
sir. Yes.
I
What
was
happened
able
when
to
I
give
played
out.
with it, so it came out all right. We
Good.
had a very, very wonderful year for growing for outdoor.
It's true. You know, it's
Nice.
largely based on whether it's dry in October up until at least the middle of October. And
Yeah.
this year we had a dry first half of October, and that definitely helped a lot. And we didn't have all the fires we had last year, at least here in the Portland area, where the year before we had the Columbia River Gorge on fire, which
Yeah, to have all that smoke in the air and ash floating around.
yeah, that wasn't
Can
good
make quite a difference.
for the plants or for us.
I think you guys need to vaporize that at the art department.
Okay, well, you're going to be there, I hope, to help with that.
Try to get there. Yeah.
All right, all right. Here, they're looking at that one. Turn it sideways there. Got a little show and tell. So if you guys have any questions about adult marijuana use, restoring industrial hemp, or medical marijuana, you can call us at that number on your screen there. It's 503-288-4442. 4442. That's 503-288-4442. We have a studio audience here as well. And there is an off-camera microphone if someone in the studio audience has a question for us, and you can ask that as well. If you'd like to come down and join the studio audience, we're here most Friday nights, though I think we got one more show this year, and then we're off till January. But you can come right down at the Open Signal Studio, used to be known as Portland Community Access Cable Television, right at 2766 Northeast Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. And there are seats set up for you if you want to come visit us.
Yeah, we've got quite a few folks showed up tonight.
Yeah. Last week we had Jorge Cervantes in here, and there was hardly anybody here. But it's maybe they were confused and thought he was here this week. I don't know. Anyway, you know, speaking of Jorge, we have a video of Jorge.
Excellent.
It's a tour of Marijuana Giants. And are they ready to roll that in the control room? Okay. Yes? No?
Boy,
Okay.
do I hope you're as ready as I am, because I'm going to take you on a tour unlike anything you've ever seen. Today, we're going to enter the world of outdoor gardening, deep in the California backcountry, where we will visit some of the most spectacular gardens I've ever been able to visit since I started writing about the cannabis industry almost 30 years ago. These gardens aren't just incredible, they're medical, all certified and regulated under California state law to provide medicine to medicinal dispensaries. Now, because of the way medical cannabis laws are written in California, growers are forced to adapt their practices. This includes not only growing as many plants as the law allows, but growing them to huge proportions. And one of the things we'll see is by using just a few simple techniques, it's possible not only to grow huge plants, but beautiful buds and potent medicine at the same time. So sit back and enjoy the view as we begin our journey to the green giants of California. I'm here in Northern California in this beautiful cannabis garden, medicinal cannabis garden, that's full of a cornucopia of strains. Let's go on a tour and you'll see what I mean. Here we are at a medical marijuana grower's house. This is actually the bedroom window. And let's take a look out and see what it looks like. Well, there's the garden. Incredible. These plants are 10 to 12 feet tall. It's amazing. I can't believe these things. They're huge. And I'll tell you, you can grow plants just like this. These things are in 200-gallon containers. The average they're getting is 10 gallons of water a day. And the nutrients in here are all mixed early on. But they can mix more nutrients and inject them into the fertilization system. Let's go see how they do that. That's actually pretty interesting. Boy, it's a little while to get over there. Man, look at this. These plants are huge. This blue dream has really come on nicely. I can't believe it. This is a lower bud. Huh? They're everywhere. Well, over here, we can hear the dosatron. I love these dosatrons. They're really cool. They're easy to use, very easy to use. You see you've got this little hose right here with the filter on it that fits down into the container. I got to get this back here. That fits down into the container, and you have a concentrated liquid down here. Right now they're just running plain water so I can do a demonstration. But there's a concentrated liquid down there that's usually a fertilizer, in this case organic fertilizers, because that's all he uses, or the grower uses. And then you can inject this into the system and literally dial in the percentage that you want to go into the mix. And then the other bucket is put into a pH solution. This is put into a solution here, either a pH up or down, okay? And then to dial in my pH for the water, I just look at my pH here, 6.7, and if I want to lower it, I just add in more here. I pick this up, this number up here. Once the water passes through here and picks up the fertilizer and the pH control, there's a filter out here that can pick things up, pick up any extra junk that might be in the line. And then it goes down here, and here's where the probes are for the pH and the EC meter. They're right in the line here. That's how it's easy to dial in. And then it goes into the line. This is the actual feed line manifold, and each one of these manifold tubes has a solenoid valve on it that's operated by this timer here. The timer is set for 40 minutes, and it delivers about 18 gallons of water to each 200-gallon pot. So it is so easy to operate this system, and it's right in front of you and visually, you know, a dream. The garden behind me started right here in a 24-foot diameter geodesic dome. Right here in this area is where these plants were cut March 1st of this year. They were made into cuttings. They were put into, you know, the little containers, and then later potted up into a bit bigger pots. And then they grew them out here until they were 2 to 3 feet tall. Okay, so they took them out the 15th of April. And then on the 15th of April, you think they put them outside? No, they put them in another greenhouse. Let's go take a look. This is one of the greenhouses that they put the plants in right here. In this greenhouse, it's a 1-inch PVC pipe up here that's strung over the top with some boards screwed to the sides. Real simple construction. They put a plastic skin over the top and a few light bulbs. They just needed a few watts to keep these plants from flowering, because they're really prone to flowering. So just a little extra light at night kept them from flowering. That was really important. Then they grew these babies up to here. They were huge when they moved them out. The 3rd of June, plants went outdoors into these giant pots. And you know, they were kind of leggy and everything. And it seemed like it was a little late in the year to put them out, actually. But this year, in this climate, it was cool. So they had to wait for a while. And I am amazed at the outcome. Look at these buds. There's buds everywhere. Big ones, little ones. They're just amazing. This is great. This is just a bud out of the side. Boy, I can't believe it. These are huge. These plants are going to go at least 5 pounds, possibly 8 to 10. We'll see how it just shakes out at the end. Statistics pending.
All right. Well, the smallest plant in that garden was 4 pounds of flower. That's a pretty good yield. So with your plants there, you had them in containers, though.
Right.
How big were your containers?
My containers were
like 10 gallons.
10 gallon size.
About 10 gallon size. Yeah, I know
just
my
barely
containers
would hold themselves up in the wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, how much? Do you know how much you average per plant? Did you figure
it
that
kind
out?
of depended on the species or the variety. I mean, for the UK cheese, I ended up with pretty close to a pound for the one plant. It got about 6 feet tall.
That's
You know,
pretty
I'm
good for a
growing in
10
an
gallon container.
Urban camouflage situation. So
Yeah.
the OG Kush probably gave me about 1.5 pounds. The Obama Kush probably 3/4 pound. The sativas were lighter than the indicas. The indicas really loved.
You know,
the weather
we
this
measured
year.
out ours, and we found our lemon varieties, Lemon Haze and Lemon Pledge, were the most productive per plant.
Those went crazy.
Yeah.
And they make some of the best oil I've made yet.
I love the flavor of limonene and lemon pledge and lemon haze. I just like that lemony flavor.
It's really, really awesome.
So we are live here. It is the 14th of December, and if you have a question for us, you can call us at that number there on your screen. You might notice that this banner is turned around. That's because Israeli-Canadian oil company, unbelievably, I'll say that again in case you didn't get it, our long-term viewers know, an Israeli-Canadian oil company called Adira Energy, A-D-I-R-A, went into court and got an injunction to stop us from using our own name, claiming that we sold them our company for no money whatsoever. They kind of think they gave us magic beans. I'm not sure exactly what they think. But the judges seem to be pretty corrupt. In fact, even Multnomah County prosecutor said the judge who gave them control of our company in an injunction hearing, Matarazzo, is a corrupt judge. And therefore, Multnomah County prosecutor won't bring any more criminal cases in front of her. But she decided after listening that these people who didn't pay us anything deserved everything we had created, and that we have to turn this banner around or we could be fined $500 a day. And so we're going to trial on that in March. Maybe you can come and see what happens. Right now we don't have any lawyers. We spent about $170,000 on lawyers, but these guys have spent almost $2 million on the most expensive law firm in the state. So to find out more, call us at the number there on your screen, 503-235-4606. You know, we created a multi-million-dollar business, the THCF Medical Clinics and Empower Clinics. I personally trademarked the name Empower Clinics. Judge Matarazzo ruled I had to give it to them or be fined $500 a day. And so hopefully a jury of our peers will decide otherwise. And so if I urge you, don't go to our old clinic. Do not go to Empower Healthcare. If you are looking for a doctor because you have any of these conditions, then we have a clinic, and there are a number of other clinics all around the country. We have a physician referral service. We'd be happy to help you. Just give us a call at 503-235-4606. If you're in Ohio, New York, those are just two of the states I've referred people to in the past few weeks, or anywhere else in the country, you're looking for a doctor to help you, then give us a call at 503-235-4606. So on that industrial hemp bill, did you realize that it also allows extraction of CBD flowers? And so extraction is included as long as it has less than 0.3% or less than 1/3 of 1% THC.
That's good, though. It's a good place to start.
There are a lot of businesses all over the country that are jumping on that. Farmers grew quite a bit of hemp this year with this farm bill. Make it not just an experimental program, but a full program that might even include crop insurance in the near future. Then I think that's going to make a huge difference for the hemp industry. And we need the hemp industry for our environment, to stop deforestation, to stop world hunger with protein, to stop so many different things. We don't have to burn petroleum for fuel. We can use hemp. In fact, I learned that from this guy, Gatewood Galbraith, back in the late 80s. And we have a video with Gatewood Galbraith. This is from a series that came out in 1989. It was called The 90s. That's back when the 90s were still in the future. And here is Gatewood Galbraith, one of my mentors, talking about hemp. We'll be right back.
Candidate for governor in the May 91 Democratic primary in the state of Kentucky. And my main issue is choice. My main issue and fear is that the whole bundle of rights of individual free choice held by the individuals in this country and citizens in this country, the kinds of freedoms that our forefathers fought and died for since 1776, that our subsequent generations have gone to war for, are now under assault by the present administration and the past administration and its two-term stay in office. These people, Ronald Reagan and George Bush, are not conservatives. These people are aliens. These people have nothing to do with conservatism. When I was growing up, I'm a conservative candidate. I want to license and regulate marijuana as a cash crop and let our farmers make this money instead of make these international criminal syndicates in South America and Mexico rich. And the current administration calls itself conservative, but when I was growing up, conservative meant you kept the government in a little box. You didn't let it out. The government stayed in a little box because when you let government out of that box, it started exponentiating and feeding upon itself, becoming self-serving and always against the interest of the people. Inexorably, it will grow to occupy the space currently occupied by our civil liberties, and it has been doing so for the last 40 years. Ronald Reagan snookered the public and said that he was going to take government off the backs of business. He did that, but he put government directly on the backs of the people. He took all that built-up government, he gutted the social programs, and took all that money and fed his cronies with it, and then brought in the military and the police force to ride herd on the population. That's exactly what's happened. I'm going to reverse that effect. When I get to be governor of the state of Kentucky, I'm going to put that government back in the box. I'm going to tell the government we don't have the right to interfere in a lot of different aspects of individuals' lives in this state. Marijuana is a benchmark question for many reasons. Number one, a society that can accommodate alcohol and tobacco has absolutely no argument with marijuana, which is far less harmful than either of those two. The state has no right to tell the individual he cannot alter his consciousness. If he can do that respectably and in a non-violent or threatening manner, then he should be able to do that. Not with addictive drugs. Not with addictive drugs. I am not talking about legalizing drugs. I'm talking about licensing and regulating marijuana as a cash crop in the state of Kentucky. I can kick crack and cocaine and heroin out of the state of Kentucky. I can solve that problem. My granddaddy never grew crack or cocaine or heroin, but he used to grow the hell out of hemp. And when he did, we used to make a pretty penny on it. I'll kick crack and cocaine and heroin out because what I'm going to do is I'm going to tax and regulate the marijuana smoker and remove them as a buffer zone from around the hard drug market. You know, as a marijuana smoker, I resent being forced to run involuntary interference with the hard drug market. I don't belong in that same category. I will not be placed in that same category. And I sure as hell, I'm not going to be going through my life as an adult in this society looking over my shoulder, wondering when the government is going to pounce out and haul me off and hold me in a cage for ransom because of my association with the green plant my granddaddy used to grow. You know, if we're going to fight about this, we're going to fight about it in front of the courthouse with a bullhorn at 12 noon in the sunshine with the public watching. And if we're going to fight about it, we're going to fight about it politically and through the system. And we're just going to flat take over the system and remove this kind of asinine fascist law and this kind of asinine fascist mentality from existence in this society.
Wow. Participation. Cool. Hope you make it. All right.
Okay, well, that was Gatewood Galbraith. I think that was on a series called The 90s back in 1989. Gatewood was one of our mentors. I met him at normal conventions in D.C., and he introduced me to Willie Nelson. In fact, Willie Nelson saw this video on PBS and called Gatewood and did a benefit concert for Gatewood's gubernatorial campaign. Unfortunately, Gatewood wasn't successful.
It's easy to see how you could get behind him, though. He was a clear thinker, orator, and
a great orator.
Kind of a genius of his
time.
time.
I steal his line. He passed away. He came here and was on our Cannabis Common Sense show in May of 2011 and went and we did a benefit over at the Clinton Street Theater. And we have some video of that we'll show in just a moment here.
Awesome.
But he introduced me back then in 1990 to Willie Nelson, which I still get to see him every now and then.
That's a pretty good hookup.
Yeah, it was really good. You know, one thing we should say is for farmers out there who are growing hemp or cannabis, test your soil. Don't use pesticides because when you make concentrates or you grow in soil that has residue of toxic products in it, whether it be metals or pesticides, then your flowers and your cannabis will have those toxic elements in them. So you've got to test your soil and make sure that you're growing a clean crop, and that means not using pesticides. And that's where I always am a proponent of organic growing methods.
Ladybugs only.
Yeah, That's good. You don't have to worry about smoking a ladybug. Yeah. Here is a little 2-minute video we made with Gatewood Galbraith back in 2011. We'll be right back after this video.
Could you tell our audience a little bit how that came about and how you actually first taught Willie Nelson, who's now a big proponent of biodiesel, about hemp biodiesel?
We'd always heard that Rudolph Diesel had manufactured his diesel engine run off seed oil. We really didn't understand, quite grasp that. This was in the early 90s, late 80s. And then a fellow from Nevada, Las Vegas, Nevada, came through town driving a little Volkswagen diesel, and he was running it off Burger King oil. And so we had just derived some hemp oil out of hemp seeds. Hemp seeds are 30 to 40% oil by weight. You got 100 pounds of hemp seeds, you can derive 30 to 40 pounds of pure oil out of it. And so we had some of that, and he tested it out in his engine, and he says, this is the best seed oil that I've ever driven this car on. And so we had seed oil. When Willie came in to do a benefit concert for me, we poured that hemp oil into my Mercedes diesel and drove it about 110 miles across Kentucky. And it was the first time in, I guess, 50 to 60 years that any vehicle had ever been driven on hemp oil on the United States roads. But Willie told me later on, 12 years later actually, about 10 years later, he says, Gatewood, he says, that afternoon we did that. It taught me what it was all about, and that's the reason I started my biofuel company, was from what we learned that afternoon driving your Mercedes across there. And we were also smoking about the biggest hooters that probably rode in Kentucky at the time.
And there was a caravan of us. We went from the Hyatt there and Rupp Auditorium through Frankfurt, the state capital, which is about 80 miles, and then altogether 120 miles all the way into Louisville, which is the largest city in Kentucky. And then he did a big benefit concert for you there that night.
That's right.
All right. Well, there it is. Unfortunately, Gatewood passed away from complications of pneumonia. He should have gone in the hospital. I think it was January 2nd of 2012. So he did not live to see marijuana becoming legal in Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Alaska, Washington, D.C. But he definitely pushed us along the way and was an inspiration not just to me, but to many, many other people. Jack Hare and many, many others. So I'm
great
glad
cannabis
to
pioneers.
pay tribute to Gatewood here tonight. So again, we were talking about soil toxicity causing problems with the flour that's produced, and that's definitely an issue for
some people. Just over fertilize anyways. I mean, you can taste it in the end result, no matter how long that seems they wash it. It always has kind of a man-made flavor there. It's just not right.
Yeah.
So I'm a purist. I grow for what I'm going to make my own concentrates from, and so I've learned that if you use nature's insects, ladybugs and walking sticks, the praying mantis, they'll eat anything. They're indiscriminate. The ladybugs pretty much eat just the little tiny aphids and spider bites and such. But if you use them properly, they're very effective. I got through the entire year this year without a single spider mite. So.
We have our hemp flame of freedom right here. This is hemp oil burning a hemp wick. This is next week's hemp wick. We had Gatewood talking about hemp fuel, and we have a little 1-minute video about hemp fuel that we're going to run right now, give you some information about that. We can wipe out the use of petroleum by growing hemp on about 10% of the world's arable land. And Gatewood said the ones who brought us marijuana prohibition were the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, elite, fascist sons of a bitches. And I decided a long time ago we couldn't let that go away with Gatewood, so it took me a while to learn it, but we keep it going. So here's a short video about hemp fuel. All right. That's a short message from the folks at Hemp Helps, and they've helped us tonight just a little bit. Anything you want to say in closing here tonight, Dana?
Keep it, the momentum going. We're on our way to 100% legalization recognition.
Yeah, it looks like we'll see it in Mexico, and I think we need to keep deregulating. There's too much regulation being placed on the cannabis plant. This stuff isn't dangerous. It doesn't need to be treated like it's dangerous.
Absolutely.
So we need to make sure our politicians quit enacting this.
Thank you to you for what you do.
Well, thank you. You've been helping us here on the show for almost 20 years in the control room. It's good to have you on the.
You got started in this long before me, and with pioneers with Gatewood Galbraith and Willie
many
Nelson
others.
And many others.
A lot of them aren't with us anymore. And I want to thank you viewers out there as well. We'll be back for one more live show this year. Then we'll just have recorded shows over Christmas and New Year's. See you next week on the 21st. Thanks for watching, and help restore hemp.
Oh, yeah. Ganja. We want Metaganja. Ganja. We want to grow Metaganja. Stick it in the ground, water it down, Metaganja. Woo-hoo. Ganja. We need Metaganja. Ganja. We need to share Metaganja. It's renewable energy. Find clothes for you and me. Metaganja. Woo-hoo. Ganja. We like Metaganja. Ganja. We like to use Metaganja. Prohibition must end. That's right, prohibition must end. Metaganja! Woohoo! I'll let you guys go. Thank you very much.
We enjoy it.
Thank you.